Absolutely Talks, empowering talent for global careers. Brought to you by Absolutely French, presented by Armelle Pervin.
Bon, I'm happy, Fiona, to welcome you for our first Absolutely Talks. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Armelle, for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So it's a live event, so we will be happy to have questions during all this time. And if you want to introduce yourself on the chat, it will be also very useful for us to know who you are and why you are here today. Just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Armelle Pervin. I'm the founder of Absolutely French, and I started 12 years ago now with Absolutely French. And we are much more than a French school. We help expat spouses and expatriates to integrate in France with English workshops and also a community of expats, which is very important for them to integrate easily in France. Our clients are L'Oréal, TotalEnergies, Subsea 7, LVMH, etc. And now 80% of expat spouses are looking for a job when they come to their new country, and the work permit visa is crucial to help them to find a job. So I'm really, Fiona will explain you all about
Briefly,
the immigration process and how it could help expat spouses to develop their own career abroad. So Fiona, could you please, so you are in English.
Yes, I'm English, very proud to be English, I might say. I'm married to a French man. I have 4 French children, grandchildren. I'm very integrated in France. And I've been working in the global mobility space now for 25 years. As such, I'm what's known as an immigration expert, which means for the common man that I advise on visas, work and residence permits. And I've always been very interested to help spouses and partners who are moving to France, because it is the key for a successful assignment or a successful arrival in France. And today, well, as you know, at least 80% of the spouses or the accompanying member do have jobs. They have a professional career. Perhaps 60 years ago, there were people who came and they didn't have such a job, but they're not going to give up their career because their spouse is being assigned to France.
Yes. I'm sorry.
No problem.
It's a live event. So something happened at the same time.
That's the joy of a live event.
Exactly. So you were also an expat spouse.
Yes, I was an expat spouse, like you.
Yes.
And I was an expat spouse, but a long, long time ago. My husband was working for a bank in Boston, and I arrived there very, very young, and I did not have the right to work. And I had no intention at that age of having children, and therefore, what do you do? So I can completely understand people who are moving here who, yes, you want to know what you're going to be doing. It's part of the move.
Exactly. Yes.
So what's going to be very important to start with? I would say that the 2 important facts are, first of all, the spouse or partner needs to be very clear if they do wish to work in France, and in what capacity. Are they going to continue to be working for their home country employer if they're employed? If they have their own company, are they going to continue to work for that company? Are they going to open up something, or are they going to move here, find a job? What do they do? Do they speak the language? There are a lot of questions around that, but you have to be very clear at the start what you're going to be doing, because the immigration really, really stems from that. and there are solutions. That's the good news. As such.
Very good. And just so we have a case study, but I have one question because for most of the time when expat spouse arrive in absolutely French, they said before coming that they will not work in France because they are not sure. So they arrive with.
So they arrive. So this is absolutely classical, Armelle, and I think it's interesting for everybody who's listening. It's normal when you're moving abroad, you don't know the country, you have no idea what's in store for you. And so you think, right, probably the easiest thing is to arrive, have a look-see, find my feet, do some language classes, and then we'll see. But most of the time, the person actually does want to work in some capacity, as such, especially today when there are a lot of men who are accompanying their wives. And they've had jobs like a woman, high powered, and they're not going to give up their careers either. So there could be a break, let's say, a pause, but they are going to want to work. Now, from an immigration perspective, because that's perhaps going to be your next question, or would you like me to do the case study first?
No, first.
Okay, an immigration perspective.
Yes.
So the good news is that, first of all, a large number of people are coming on what we call a talent permit. Now, if you are a spouse, now by spouse, it means that you have to, but for immigration, you have to be married and you have a marriage certificate. So be very careful with the wording, both the HR mobility managers, that when you speak about a spouse, you must say clearly at the beginning, by spouse, I mean married with a marriage certificate. Because if the person is married with a marriage certificate, they can benefit from a talent passport family permit. And this allows them to work in any capacity. They can open a company, they can be employed, they can do whatever they want. So that's the very good news.
The very best option for...
That's the very, very, very best option. Then there are other options. The other options are, first of all, and this is something which a lot of people don't realize. I'm not going to say that this is going to be long term because you've got to be a bit careful about this. But if you are employed or you have your own company, and let's say wherever it is, and you're going to continue working for that company, if your work is not for the benefit of a French company, a French client, a French project, you may work, and you're working from home, I might say, you may work under a long stay visitor's visa. It is authorized. Now, there are a lot of red flags in that as well, that people have to be very careful about, especially the HR mobility managers, especially those, if it's an employer, let's say in the US, they've got to be very aware of certain things that could happen, because here in France, people are very protected by law when they're an employee. And if they fall down the stairs at home during working hours, yes, it would be considered as an accident du travail, a work accident. So there are things you have to put in place. My advice is that to begin with, it can be a good solution, but I wouldn't go down that route long term because it doesn't get you into anything long term. Long stay visitors applying for 10-year permits, they're very regularly refused.
I see.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Fiona. And so do you have another case study?
Yes. So a case study as an example. I have John Powell with his wife, who is Mary Jane. Now, John Powell and Mary Jane, they've been married for 15 years. They're Canadian. And John has been given a very, very good offer here in France. So he's going to be hard. This is not an intergroup transfer. Unfortunately, John does not qualify for a talent permit. Now, Mary Jane, on the other hand, they've got 3 children who go to school, and she has a very good job. She's a Canadian tax expert, and she works for a firm who's an accounting firm, and she is only working for clients who are Canadian companies or people who are residents in Canada through this firm. So she could indeed first of all, apply for a long stay visitor's visa because there's not a talent permit for her. It's the only solution. It's never guaranteed as well.
Okay.
That's something which global mobility managers do know about and they have to be very aware about. And she could work. She's working from home as such.
Okay, she could work for the Canadian company.
She can continue to work for the Canadian company.
Because she has no French clients.
No French clients, nothing to do with anything in France.
Yes.
But of course, there's going to be labour law requirements that need to be put in place just to guarantee things.
Okay.
But it's not just, I'm taking a plane and I'm going to open my computer and work. She's not on holiday. So she should have an assignment letter. She should have a letter authorising her to work as a remote worker. She should have a certificate of coverage so that her social security is maintained. And we would always say that the assignment letter should be viewed as well by a labour law specialist in France so that certain points are covered inside that. And again, this is not long term. So what happened to Mary Jane after 2 years? Because after 2 years, one's getting to a stage that they've decided that they do want to remain here. They bought a house, the children are settled. And so she's got to start thinking about, what am I doing? That's when you apply for a change of status. Exactly like those who arrive who've said, no, we don't want to work. But actually, after a couple of months, yes, we do want to work. So you apply for a change of status. Mary Jane, like a lot of other people, actually moved into an entrepreneur status, opened her own company. And it all went well. What you just have to be very aware of is that a change of status always takes time. So we're talking about a 3 to 4 month process.
Okay, so she can't work without the 3-month process, or she has
to
start before.
So during the process, because she had a valid permit as a long stay visitor and she's employed by a Canadian company, she can continue to that capacity. But she cannot start working on her French clients until she's authorized.
Okay. I understand.
So she actually opened her own company. She, a little bit like John, didn't qualify for a talent because you have a talent creation of a company category, but you have to invest 30,000, and they felt that that was a lot of money to be investing in a company, which they weren't quite sure if this was going to be a success. So she just went for a straightforward entrepreneur. She did open her company. So between opening the company, setting it all up, getting the first step and the authorizations, it's 3 to 4 months. And during that period, she cannot work for that company.
Okay.
Yet.
Okay. Understand. Okay. And is it very different for because it was for foreign people who arrive in France? Is it very different if we compare to other countries to have?
So immigration, even European immigration, is very, very different from each country as such. There's meant to be a sort of uniform EU ruling, which does exist, but then each country takes their own rules as well. I can give you an example, like the talent passport. Well, what was now is called just talent, because we don't talk about talent passports since the new rule. A talent European blue card, the level of compensation is very different between France, Germany, Italy. But it's a European blue card.
Okay.
Okay,
so we need you anyway for everything.
No. Yeah. It's just to put people in the right direction.
And it's changing.
Oh, yes.
So a lot.
Well, immigration law always changes.
Right.
So one always has to stay ahead of it. There are changes today, but the main change today is around the French language. Which not for all categories, but it is now going to be part of for certain categories of permits, something which will be enforced more, and that people will have to reach a certain level to remain in France.
Okay. So they need me.
Yes, they do. They need you again.
So for the international mobility manager, I think it's also interesting for you to explain what is the common mistake that companies make regarding visa for expats and spouses.
And spouses.
Yes.
So it's not actually a common mistake. It's more a point which perhaps isn't looked at in detail. And I think that one of the issues is time. We're all running around and we don't have time. And that is something that when you're managing people here, you're managing something which is going to change their lives radically and change a family's life. And I think that the mobility managers need to have more time to actually assess from the start. They need to have what I call a one-touch or a high-level call at the start before anything is initiated. They need to be able to speak to these people. Now, as an immigration expert, I like to have this call without the mobility manager or the HR manager, because I find that the spouse is actually going to talk and you're going to learn a lot about the family. We learn very often things which the HR people and the mobility managers didn't know. And I'm going to give an example. We're suddenly going to discover that actually there are children from previous marriages. Nobody's thought about that.
Oh, okay.
And that can be an immigration issue.
Yeah.
We do have spouses where nobody's asked them if they want to work or they don't want to work, which can have an implication on the immigration, that immigration can adapt to certain situations. I'm going to give you an example. If I have somebody who is going to be hard and the proposed salary is 51,000 euros a year, but actually if he got the required amount, which is 55,000 euros a year, not a month, a year, Fiona, he would qualify for the Talent European Blue Card, and therefore his spouse would qualify as well. So there are questions that should be asked, and I like doing this as well because I think it's important for the spouse or the partner to feel that they are part of the assignment, that they learn what the procedure is, what the documents are going to be required, and that as accompanying them, we can learn what are their concerns. I always say, what are your concerns? Please let us know, because if you don't know what people's concerns are, you don't mention it. If these are people who are going to be worried about questions at the immigration office, no, you won't have questions. Or they're going to have questions at the visa interview. No, there are no questions. So these are lots of things. And people will say, should we learn French beforehand? Most visas don't require this at the start. Yes, I'm going to say like you, yes, go and learn French, because that's how you're going to get integrated in the country and you'll be able to work. It'll be easier, but it's not mandatory. And these things are interesting and important. And we find that with that, things go a little bit more smoothly.
Yes. Okay. And for, I forget one. I had one question. I forget it. Anyway, could you offer practical advice for ensuring compliance with French immigration laws for expatriates and their spouses, especially for companies unfamiliar with the system?
Yes. So golden rule number one is around what I call business visitor status. A lot of people are what we call visa waivered. This means that they could come to France for a short period. The ruling is the Schengen ruling of 90 days over a 180-day period, where if you're an American, a Canadian, an Australian, British, there are lots of other nationalities, Japanese, you do not require a visa. So what happens in these cases? You have a multinational company, they have a large project in France, and they're going to say to John, we need you in La Défense. We need you out there. We're building this and you've got to go on Monday. And John takes the plane and goes. And nobody's thought, but there's a lot of compliance around there. What is John doing? Can John actually come and do what's required under a business visitor status? Most of the time, no. The cases that I see, they cannot, because business visitor status is commercial meetings. Okay. Meeting clients on which you are not billing a project. Okay. So immediately there's a project and you're billing for that project, you have a meeting, you're coming to work. Okay. Meetings that are not solely for the benefit of a French company, the French entity. Okay. As such. Conferences are authorized. Training is not authorized. Sharing of experiences, reviewing work on a client site is not authorized. There are expert categories which don't require work permits, and we're not going to go into the detail of that. There are, but this has to be assessed clearly beforehand. So that's one of the very, very, very common, and that is not at all due to not being reviewed correctly by international mobility managers or HR managers, because most of the time they are not even aware that John is coming to France. And when the COVID happened, there are stories, but real stories, of people who rang up their companies and said, I'm sitting in the Philippines. What are you doing in the Philippines? Nobody was tracking people. Now it's happening more and more. Of course, we're all tracked more. Companies are spending more time on this for compliance and security as well. But that is one of the very common things. The other thing is that assignments should be prepared well in advance, because we can turn around an immigration file like any immigration service provider could turn around an immigration file in 24, 48 hours as such. But the processing time is going to take much longer. At the best, 2 to 4 weeks. At the worst, 5, 6 months.
Yes.
So if you don't plan in advance, and if you have families coming in, because we are talking about spouses and partners, and we have families coming in with children, there's probably going to be a start date, the school year, September.
Exactly.
And I think that most families would like to arrive in July so that everybody gets settled down. So if we're talking about July, yes, come March, everybody should be looking and saying,
Impossible.
who is meant to be coming?
Okay.
And please remember, this year there are the Olympic Games. Therefore, there is going to be a huge increase, not for the professionals, the athletes, etc. They have a special side of the consulate dealing with them, but for visitors who need to come, who want to come to see the Olympic Games, and please do come to France and watch the Olympic Games, but some people have to apply for a visa for that. So yes, the consulates are going to be under a lot of pressure.
And I really remember, because we moved, I was an expat spouse, as you know, and we moved in different countries. And for India and Mozambique, we arrived in August with our kids, and in end of September we had to go back to France for
visas. There you are.
So I really understand how it is, and the problem that happened after that.
Yes.
Because you need to move with all the family, wait in France for 3 weeks to have a new visa. And so it's complicated.
It is complicated. And of course, I mean, we're talking about best case scenarios. But you and I are business people, and we know that business has to be business as usual. So one has to work around this.
Yeah. And you, in fact, the company lose money.
Yes,
because
of
when
course.
you have to move all the family and
they lose money. They're creating stress.
Yeah.
They're not. I mean, the beginning of an assignment is not starting well. Depending on the country that you're going to. Is the spouse or the partner somebody who's used to assignments? If this is their first assignment and they arrive with 3 children under 10 who don't speak the language, they are going to be putting pressure on the employee. Therefore, the employee probably is finding it difficult as well.
Yes, exactly. Alors, for the trends and evolution in spouse immigration, at Absolutely French, we have noticed that 20% now of spouses are coming with a remote job. And are there any emerging trends in the field of international mobility that specifically affect the immigration process for expat spouses?
Well, obviously, with COVID and the restrictions that happened, the big trend is remote work. I mean, it affects everybody, just not without going on an assignment. We all work remotely. I think that most companies will allow their employees to work 2 or 3 days remotely. So, of course, that is a trend that we're seeing more and more. And France does not have a digital nomad visa. It doesn't exist. Therefore, either you go into the long stay visitor as such, and again, I am going to really stress that this is not something to do for long term, but it could be a solution to begin with. It would allow you to come in, it would allow the spouse or the partner to continue to be employed by the home country, and then you have to see. about social security, one of the things that would be important if you're a remote worker is that you do need to see if there's a bilateral agreement between France and your home country regarding social security. Those are the points that you have to be very careful about.
Yeah.
And you're not considered to be an employee on secondment or detachment, but there are things that need to be reviewed correctly regarding labour law.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, do you have, for new managers, do you have an advice on spouse support? Not only about visa, but maybe more.
Just generally,
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think that if you're an international mobility manager, if I may say, I think the very important thing is to have a good knowledge and perhaps go on a course to do with cross culture.
Yes.
I think that's really very, very important. You can't just send people to a country which you don't know anything about that country. It's going to be important. And it's to find out, the more you get to know the employee who you are sending on an assignment and the spouse and what their concerns are, the better it's going to be for everybody, for them mainly, but also for you as a mobility manager, because you've taken care of them and therefore you're going to be appreciated. It's gone smoothly. You haven't just plugged in figures into a tracking sheet on an online platform and said, oh, just upload and get on with it. No, we are talking about human beings. So a little bit of time has to be taken. I might be old fashioned, but I think it's important.
No, I totally agree with you. Yeah. Yes, really. And I think what is missing, because I was asking for when I was abroad, is to have a meeting with the company about what you want to do before leaving.
Yes, yes, exactly. And to clearly set out, the majority of companies, especially large companies, they all have global mobility policies. And the global mobility policy needs to be shared, not only with the employee, but to ensure that the employee has shared that with the spouse or partner, so that they can go through it and so that they know what is the package that is being proposed. And then to sit down and say, right, actually, we don't need schooling because we haven't got children, or we're going to send our children to public schools in France, therefore we don't need private schooling. But I'd like to have French classes, and that's not in the policy. So how can we go around having it so that expectations can be met and there is a clear understanding?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, because same for me when I was abroad. I didn't know that I could have language lessons in India.
There you go.
I mean, so yes, I take the time with the couple to explain all the package is very, very interesting. I think
it's very important.
It takes 20 minutes, but the effect is very important, I think.
It's very important. And I can give you an example, Armelle, which was quite funny. We had a client, a large international firm, and during such a call, they actually discovered that the spouse was extremely experienced and talented in IT, and they hired her. And they didn't have to go through immigration because she was getting a talent passport family. Now, there's one point that I didn't mention. I'm sorry, I overlooked that, and it is important to know. If you have a talent passport family permit, you are totally linked to your spouse. That means that when the main applicant or employee spouse ends the assignment, your permit is no longer valid. Okay? And that is very, very important. So we have had cases in the past when I was managing applications where companies have come to us and said, no, we don't want the spouse on a talent passport family permit. We want them to have their own status. That can happen. So that, you know, if there was one of them who left, the other is not affected.
It's very interesting to know understand that, I think. Okay, thank you, Fiona.
Not at all.
We have some questions on that.
Super.
If you have any personal experience, I've seen that Pascal just wrote something about that she was an expat, suppose, in the US. a long time ago and didn't have a work visa. I think it's
like me.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Pascal, I'm very sorry. I'm not an expert on US immigration, therefore I can't really comment on this. There are possibilities. I do have network partners. You know, if you would like to have an answer to that, I can get one for you.
For next time in US, Pascal, next expatriation. For the cross-cultural courses, do you think they should send all their expats?
Yes, when possible. It's, for me, yes, cross-cultural and language classes are always going to help an expat and his family to settle into a country. So yes, when it's possible, when the company agrees and it's in the policy or not in the policy, but they agree, yes, I would say that it is important too.
Yes. Coaching for spouses remain anecdotic in some companies. What do you think?
Yes, I would agree. You know, it's all around cost. Let's be honest. It's the bottom line that counts, and that global mobility is something. So global mobility is something which costs a company. But my personal opinion is that I think that a lot of companies don't benefit from that. That they send an employee to work, let's say, in China for 3 years. Obviously, the employee is going to learn a lot about China, how you work in China, what happens there, and will have changed as well. But when the employee returns home, most of the time, nobody asks him to debrief. Nobody asks him anything. Sometimes he stops working for China, but it's very strange how companies don't seem to really reap on that this experience makes people grow professionally enormously. I mean, personally, of course, as well, but that nobody comes back and says, well, actually, I think that everybody could benefit from his experience as such.
Yes. And I have another question. It's for the same-sex couples.
Yes.
Is it the same for if they are not married, same-sex couples?
They have to. France? So, same-sex couples, if they're married, it's exactly the same as everybody else as well. They're a married couple. It's recognized in France, thank goodness. And therefore they can benefit from the talent passport. And if they're not married, well, it's exactly the same as any other couple as well. Yes.
Okay, no difference.
No difference.
Okay. Alors, while you are waiting for your visa and your spouse has already gone to start working in the new country, can you go, or do you have to wait for the visa in your home country?
So, if you come to France, well, first of all, it's going to depend if you're visa bound or not. So let's say that you are not visa bound and you can come to France without a visa. Well, yes, you can come and choose your apartment here, choose the school, but you're going to have to go back to your home country to collect your visas. Visas are only issued outside of France. They're either issued in your country of origin, or if you are a resident with a residence permit or visa long stay in another country, you could apply in that country.
And I have another question for the business visa, because if someone is coming to work in France with you said it's not possible to have a business visa because they have a French client, or what could they use?
No, so first of all, a business visa is only for short term. Okay. And it's only for those who need to have a visa to come into France. Okay. So okay. As such. So if you're going to come in for a short term, either an assignment or to develop your business, you can come on a business visa. But let's say you're a project IT manager and you're needed to come to work in France. What would happen is that there would be an assessment. Is this project manager considered to be an expert in his field? If the project manager is an expert, he would not require, or she would not require, a work permit as such.
Okay.
Can be considered as an expert, but to be considered, you have to be really certain. The company has to be sure that this person is an expert. So an expert, there's no law saying you have to have this degree, you have to have these number of years experience. Myself, when I do an assessment like that, I'm going to say, okay, the person has a degree, doesn't have a degree, has how many years experience? Somebody who has a BA and 3 years experience, unless it's in a very, very specific field, is probably not an expert. But somebody who has a master's degree, over 5 years experience, and is paid at the level of an expert, yes, could be considered as an expert. So that person would not require a work permit as such. But probably the person is on detachment. Therefore, there's a posted worker notification that has to be done. One has to assess whether the Social Security, there's an agreement with France or not. One has to remind people about working hours, which exist in this country, and they're pretty strict. One has to remind people about the level of salary, because there's rules on that. It's not just the minimum salary. We have collective bargaining agreements in France. So you have to take the expert's role, check on the collective bargaining agreement, what that level of salary is, because it may be that they're paid less in their home country. During their assignment, they have to be paid that amount. If the Social Security, the company may need to register for Social Security. There's quite a lot of red tape that has to be done.
Okay. You write everything after the video in the comments.
Yes.
Be sure you have everything. Okay. Do you have, is there any other question? Just, okay. If you are able to apply for many visas, but would say there is the best one to go.
So that's, I can completely understand the question, but that's an impossible one to answer because
it depends.
Yes, a visa, experts like myself, we're going to assess as per the person's role, level of salary, years experience, and what is the aim? Are they being hired? Is this an intra-group transfer? But there are a lot of excellent visas. I mean, the talent category is really unique and fantastic, especially for the spouse.
Thank you for that. I think it's very good. How can we encourage policy change and company culture to support expat spouses?
Definitely.
How can we?
How can we?
How can we?
I think it's through informal discussions, and that the more one discusses the fact that happy spouses mean that assignments are going to be successful, whereas unhappy spouses can end an assignment.
It's what happened most of the time.
Yes, exactly. So you've got to one has to do it in an informal manner to encourage companies to look at this. And I mean, a lot of companies do have fantastic programs. And really do accompany.
And really take care of you.
And even small companies, when you start talking to them, they're very clear they would like to be able to take care of the spouse, but they don't know how to. So they're asking for the information which we provide.
Yes, thank you, Fiona. I think it's time to end. Yes.
Thank you, Armelle.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you very much.
It was really, really good to have you for the first Absolutely Talks.
I feel very honoured.
Yes. And the next one will be on 5 April. And we are welcoming Sandex, the Sandex, which is an association of international companies. And Permits Foundation will be there too. So it will be a very, very interesting Absolutely Talks. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Absolutely Talks. Empowering talent for global careers. Brought to you by Absolutely French.